Hey everybody, this is Bri,
And this is Wes.
and I guess we just decided to record one of our conversations.
The best kind of conversation where it's 11 o'clock at night and we realized this is worth recording.
Yeah. Hopefully we can edit. We could definitely edit some things out.
Yeah, but we wanted these recordings to be genuine, and that's what it is.
So I think maybe to start is being a little bit more transparent. I think that we've shared a lot of our hopes and our positivity, and I think there's a lot of strength in vulnerability. Of course, I'll never be so vulnerable that I'm doing it in a vulnerable place. I will never be fully vulnerable. But like I'm going to have a little bit of control over the situation of my vulnerability, I think.
That's okay. That's perfectly fine.
I mean, whether it's okay or not, it's just how it is. So it's
Yes, it
not
is.
really, I think, something I'm
Yes,
going
it
to
is.
ever be willing to work on. So it's good that it's okay.
And self awareness is also key.
Totally. Definitely. I have a weird thing about this. Maybe we can maybe someone listening can identify maybe some type of psychologist, therapist type of person.
Stay tuned for episode 2.
Some things I'll say are better left packed in deep inside of your soul. I don't think we have to heal all parts of ourselves. But maybe, I'm not an expert. Some people think that, some people don't. But this conversation started from really the fact that I gotta take our dog out. I do gotta take her out. I do gotta take her to the restroom. So we're gonna take a pause on this. And we're back. I don't think she had to really go that bad. I think she wanted some attention. Uncharacteristic of her. Wow, she's looking a little ashamed. It's not that deep, Harley. All right. Well, back to our recording. So, yeah, you got a boog. So we talked about how I hate being vulnerable, but we talked about how we know that it's important. So we intellectualized it. So we talked a little bit about vulnerability,
Yes.
and we've admitted that we want to share a bunch of parts of our journey. And this is one of them. The reality is that this is one of them.
Yeah?
It's looking at what you used to love and do, because realistically, we are doing a couple things at one time, right?
Yeah.
It's like we are taking an opportunity. I guess it could be all about framing. We are taking an opportunity to look at what you do and kind of taking an opportunity to kind of reinvent yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which is a beautiful thing. But we're also strategically looking at a problem, which is we don't know with absolute certainty really what you can and can't do in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And aside from that, right now, and for the next couple weeks, is you're not able to work.
True. Yeah, that is just the reality of the situation. There's some unavoidable uncertainty, and it's frustrating because there's not really anything to solve. It's simply seeing what happens. And I think it's always when you reinvent yourself one of those things where you sort of feel good and bad at the same time, right? It's like reinventing even when it's exciting and for the best, and something that you're like, yeah, like this is absolutely the time. It still doesn't just feel all good all the time, because it feel like it usually comes after something hard. We don't decide to reinvent ourselves if things are going perfectly, right? We
Right.
decide to reinvent ourselves because I heard I'm gonna butcher this. This is a rough paraphrase, but somebody said we change under only certain conditions. When things are so bad that we're forced to, when we are inspired enough to do so, when shoot, I can't remember the rest of them, but it's essentially like only under certain conditions. So it's rare that all of a sudden you're going to reinvent yourself because you're like, man, everything has gone too perfectly. You're usually reinventing yourself because you're realizing that part of you or all of you needs to become a different person for the next phase of your life. The person you were may have suited where you were perfectly, but it's no longer the person you need to be for what you're trying to do.
I mean, I think no matter the reason, too, I think those are two beautiful thoughts in and of themselves. Like that idea that you change under certain circumstances or you change if you're inspired. I think leaving it at those two is like pretty profound.
Yeah.
But I think change is also just its transformation.
Yeah.
And so it's inherently going to be difficult or different.
Yeah, right. Our
It's an
brains.
adjustment, yeah.
Yeah, our brains hate uncertainty more than anything. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Things that we cannot predict and or are uncertain, our brain automatically has a bit of a survival response to it. It doesn't like when it doesn't know what's going to happen. Reducing predictability is the quickest way to make your brain want to just protect you. And protection usually looks like things we would characterize as negative. It can be anxiety, it can be, you know, making you stiff, it can be making you feel fear, it can make you feel pain, right? Those are all protective. And so we can't really avoid those. So even when we're changing for the better, it's still uncertain.
Well, so now that just reminded me of why I said let's record. It's because I asked you, when did you feel your best?
Yeah, and the exact question was, when did you feel the epitome of yourself? Like, when did you feel your youest you?
Uh huh.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know why I phrased it like that, but.
But I liked it. Because I immediately had an answer. Like, the way you phrased it, I was like, oh, I know exactly when I felt like my meest me.
I wonder how many people, because I mean, it was the same time frame I did, which was probably like literally the exact same day since you decided to be born on the same day as me.
We have the same birthday. She's happy about it.
So I can't wait. Can't wait till the next one when we share cake. And it's so great.
I got you a heart-shaped pizza.
Remember that time we were talking about pain and where it comes from? Just kidding. I appreciated the heart-shaped pizza. But nothing can take away the pain of having to share my birthday, so we're just going to have to cross this bridge later. I don't care that people think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
So when did you feel like your youest you?
No, you shouldn't answer.
Oh, because you asked me first. So, where my mind went immediately was the summer going into my sophomore year of high school. I had a good friend, and ultimately he was a coach, named Esteban. And so I played soccer in high school. And when I was a freshman, I just sort of started getting into working out, like, going to the gym, lifting weights, whatever. And I really liked it, but at that point I didn't really have a clue what I was doing, as with most of us when we first start, right? So Esteban was sort of like at the time like my role model because he was like an assistant coach, and when he showed up, I mean, he was jacked. He was super good at soccer. He was super fast. He was super fit, and all he wanted to do was train. And I just thought that was like the coolest thing in the world. And so he asked if I wanted to train with him sometime, and I was ecstatic, right? And so I had just gotten my driver's license. I'm like 16. I live in Los Alamitos, going to Los Al High School. He lives in Pasadena. And I remember this is before we had like phone GPS and everything. And so like I'd print out MapQuest directions to like go to this place I'd never been. And he's like, I start at 5 a.m. And I was like, perfect. So I'm like waking up at like 4 in the morning and like grabbing like a banana and like a protein shake and like driving in the dark to Pasadena to meet up with this guy. And, I get there at 5 and he's like, opening his door. We get into his excursion and we just worked out like 4 times. We went to the gym, got some food. Then we ran sprints at Arbor Hill in Pasadena. It's by the Rose Bowl, really famous, like super long hill. A lot of like Olympians work out there. Did sprints on the hill, got a little more food, went back to the gym, trained a different part of the body. And then we'd go to this place called Cats, which was like a early sort of speedish, plyometric-ish training facility. It was cool. And then we'd finish at his girls soccer team practice where we would play soccer like with the girls, like help coach them, whatever. And so I was there from like 5 a.m., got home at like 10 o'clock at night.
This is all day.
This is literally all day.
You were just ride or die.
Yeah, just back to back to back to back.
Esteban?
Esteban. Yes. And he was like, this is pretty much what I do every day. You're welcome to come anytime you want. And I literally just kept going every single day. Was it overtraining, like, by, knowing what I know now? Like, absolutely. But did I have the absolute most fun, even though a lot of it was painful, a lot of it was suffering? I was, like, in pain from, like, sprinting, and I was dying. It was the absolute best summer of my life.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole reason I asked you this too, or like part of the conversation before, was we were talking about pain.
Yeah.
And I was like, why is it that like I have no tolerance right now for pain?
Uh-huh.
Well, I mean, I think taking it back even further is we were defining the difference between well-being and fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And part of well-being would be like pain, kind of free of pain, or
Sure.
having a pain tolerance, whatever. I don't even think we can use these words on a podcast.
No, we can.
Okay, legally.
We're not diagnosing, treating, or anything. We're just talking.
Yeah, there's like a whole pain monopoly out there. It's a whole conspiracy. Just kidding. It's not a conspiracy, but I need to stop calling things conspiracies. Like,
maybe you're not wrong though.
I don't know. I should stop doing that. But the whole point was that I recognized that there's something else missing really from my life. And so I was like, okay, let's take it back to like when we were the most happy. And interestingly enough, you're like, the USU was the same time as me for some parts of it. I think my summer felt a little like more grueling, even though yours was definitely grueling.
Oh, just completely different to me. I mean, like, similar in concept, but completely different in terms of like how they actually transpired.
What do you mean?
Like, I mean, you'll expand more on what yours actually was. I know what it is, obviously. But like mine was just fun. Like, it wasn't like I was at a practice where I was being forced to run sprints and then forced to do this. It was like I literally could not wait. And it was like I felt like I was with like a person I wanted to be like, who was really believing in me and like hyping me up as I was doing
Yeah,
it.
totally.
That's not necessarily the same thing as what you were going through.
No, but you know what? It wasn't the summer. The summer is what I was working towards. And that sophomore year is when like I saw the fruits of my labor.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of similar.
Uh-huh.
Not really at all. I wouldn't say fun was part of it, although aspects of it was fun.
You haven't even said what it was.
I think we don't need to get into it. I mean, this is a you podcast.
There are 2 people on this podcast.
That's so true. Well, yeah, so my summer. Well, so parts of it is like what age are you at? I guess I have to share, huh? All right. Well, so that summer, my summer going into sophomore year, which is at the same time because Wes did choose to be born the same day as me
It's true.
in order to
It was
monopolize
a conspiracy.
our birthday. And I knew it. I knew it. You and Pearson. And now Payne. So I wrestled, and this was in probably like 2005.
Yeah. Sophomore year, yeah, going in, yeah.
And I was the only female wrestler at the time. And my freshman year, I sucked. I got wrecked every day. It was hard to be there. And I didn't know what I was doing. And a lot of people said I wasn't going to make it. More specifically, shout out to my father, my dad, who said, "You won't last," my freshman year. And so to prove him wrong, I showed up every day for 4 years in order to not let him be right.
Maybe he just reversed psychologied you.
Maybe. I don't know. I think it was just a comment that I took too far. And again, that's something I should unpack with a therapist. But it fueled me. It did. And I wanted so badly at the time to win state. I wanted to be the first female to win state. No matter the fact that that was an impossible dream. No matter that, I was not really good enough to do that. Just outside of being, just a girl in a guy's sport. I just genuinely didn't have, I think, probably the skills or really the intelligence. That's what I think makes the difference between you and me is like you were a very smart athlete. I was a grit athlete. Like, I could endure.
Yeah. I mean, no question. If you, as a girl, wrestled 4 years, between 2005 and 2008, I mean, that is definitely enduring. Because that is not a time where girls' wrestling was prominent yet.
It was sanctioned in California in 2011, and I graduated in 2008.
Yeah.
So there were women who I followed, too.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, at that time, I think I had a decent amount of support. So
what made you... What was it about these camps that you went to that...
those were
was
hard.
so unique?
Those were hard. They didn't know. I do kind of, I think, in some ways, discredit or kind of like, I make my experience kind of small. But they were overnight camps. And in some of them, not all of them, was the only girl. And it was very intimidating. I was harassed. And I didn't always feel safe. And then on top of that, wrestling camp is grueling.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely grueling. And I was just up against a lot, I think, at the time. It felt like in so many moments, the difference between me and everyone else was always kind of at the forefront. Like they would play a game where half of the guys take off their shirts and the other half doesn't. And it was like, what do we do with her? And then there's like a lot of comments about my body and, you know,
Yeah.
guy stuff.
Sure.
Now,
High
now
school
we,
guys, yeah.
yeah, we call it sexual harassment now. Back then it was guys being guys.
Yeah. No shit.
And I think it's just still, yeah, I like to say I didn't face a lot of adversity, but I think that is, I guess, adversity. What is adversity? Like challenge or something?
Yeah.
Obstacles. It was an obstacle and it was scary. They didn't always know where to put me, like lodging wise.
Uh-huh.
I had one camp that was particularly bad. And they had roomed me with a bunch of guys at first. And I was like, oh, I'll be okay. They're like, definitely not. And they were right. They were absolutely right about that. So it was physically hard. I guess emotionally kind of tough.
Yeah, because it's not even like you could relax after you were off the mat. You're worried about a bunch of other bullshit still.
So I think, like, I guess, like, whereas you had one person, like, lifting you up,
Yeah.
like, I had a wave of people pushing me down.
Yeah. It's very different.
But
But
I-
that,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
But there's still that sort of unifying thread of what made it so great was you were working so hard towards something that made you feel alive.
100%.
And that's just a good feeling.
Yeah. Is I had a goal and it was bigger than myself. I mean, my goal was to endure those camps so that other girls could wrestle
Oh, yeah.
because I love the sport. To this day, I love it. I'm sad I lost it. I feel like in many ways it was beat out of me.
Yeah, maybe.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. To get beat that frequently, over and over, you know, I did it for as long as I could.
But you did have some success towards the end of your wrestling career.
I mean, I definitely did my best my sophomore year. I think by junior and senior year, the challenges of coaches who've never had a female athlete, cutting weight,
Yeah.
all of those things, those really affected me
Yeah.
substantially. And to this day, they do.
Yeah, that's something that needs more attention today. Now that there are more and more girl wrestlers, I think those kinds of considerations need to be more in the forefront.
I think that even if they're not in the forefront, just by the nature of the competition, it's not going to be the same. So for example, they were pushing me to cut so much weight because I was competing against guys.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to push women to cut it nearly as much weight because the competition is more even.
Maybe, but in my experience, it doesn't matter what the sport is. Coaches, athletes, combination of the two will push things as far as they can to get a competitive advantage.
Yeah, and that's fair.
And I mean, like when I was in weightlifting,
Right.
you know, like
No, you're so right.
even there, like there was one meet that I cut to 77 kilos, which is 169 pounds, and I was like 190. And in weightlifting, you lift an hour after or 2 hours after your weigh-in. It's not like you can go get an IV or something. You know, like I put up really good numbers and almost blacked out completely clean and drinking.
But tell me you didn't feel alive.
I mean, up until that point, I was actually so ill that I was just like, I felt like I was watching myself lift. But the point being, like, there's no... like, I think after that, I was the sickest I've ever been in my entire life.
Yeah, it's honestly you're explaining like every week I had in high school. We
Yeah.
had a match every week.
Yeah, like, it's just... that's... like, the point being, people are gonna do whatever they can. they're going to do whatever they can.
You know, I had a flashback moment to this one time that I thought it would be a great idea to eat a cheesy gordita crunch right after weigh-in. It was not a great idea. But anyone who's wrestling right now is laughing because they've all been there. They've all been there.
This just reminded me, my weightlifting coach, after I made weight, I was butt naked on the scale to hit 169. Like, I was like, had zero things left that I could deplete out of my body. I go up to him and I have to start warming up in like an hour. And he looks at me, he's like, we can go about this 2 ways. And I was like, had barely eaten or drank anything for like 3 days at this point. He's like, we have 2 options. 1, we load you up with as much fluids and food as we can and hope that you lift before you throw it up.
Nope.
Or 2, we slowly
Sip.
hydrate you and feed you.
Yep.
He's like, but you need to start warming up in about 45 minutes. So which one do you want? I then chugged an entire Pedialyte in 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I was like...
The Pedialyte might be okay, but how was it?
It was... I didn't actually throw up. I just sort of blacked out. Like, nearly passed out about 90 minutes later. But what's funny about that one... I mean, this is before I knew anything about cutting weight or, like, how to adjust food. It was kind of just like what I think a lot of people who've ever cut weight have done at least once. You just stop eating and drinking and start working out more. Like,
yeah,
you know.
Hello.
And so I was like, in my mind, when I got there the day of the meet, I was still like 3 or 4 over. And so my coach was like, he's like, we'll run around the parking lot for a little bit. Like, just put your sweats on. Like, we can definitely get that off. So I'm like, okay. And in my mind, I remember jogging around the parking lot. When I talked to my coach later, he's like, no, you were so close to dying that we basically walked at like a slow speed around the parking lot and you were holding on to me the whole time because you felt like you were going to faint. But in my head, I was literally running around the parking lot.
Wow. I'm sorry, how much weight did you cut?
This was about 20 pounds in like a week.
That's not a thing.
Maybe 10 days. Mm-mm. For a guy, it's doable.
That's a big cut.
Yeah, it was.
It's a huge cut.
Because I did a meet at 85 kilos, which is 187.
Wait, was this when you were really heavy, though? When you were, like, intentionally gaining?
Not quite that big. So basically, I cut from, like, about 190, because I just did a meet at 85 kilos, which is, like, 187. Mm-hmm. But, and they were good numbers, but then we were looking, and we were just like, if you could actually lift at 77, he's like, we were like, you could be top 3 in, like, nationals, like, with your numbers.
But 87 to 77, that's 10 pounds.
Kilos.
Oh, kilos. I literally can't do the math, but I know it's a lot. Mm-hmm,
basically,
that's what they say.
Basically, I was going
but
from...
that 0.2 is really thrown me
I was going
off.
from basically 190 to 170.
Yeah.
And we had, like, 10, 12 days kind of thing.
Eee.
I was just like, I'm down to try it once.
It doesn't even matter. 20 pounds in general, that's a lot.
Yeah, I was like, I'm down to try it once, kind of thing. And he's like, we don't have time to actually have you lose any weight, like, for real. So it's just going to be, like, water, essentially. So yeah, I showed up looking like Skeletor.
Triggered.
Just so bad. Lifted about as well as I could have hoped.
All right, I have a little respect. I won't lie to the audience right now or even to you, but I do have this image of you being a pretty boy. Like, I think of you as, like, soft hands, pretty boy. Like, can't get your hands dirty. You're, like, on the ground. You played soccer, I know. It's just, like, you're, like, throwing yourself, like, my arm, my leg, my toe. That's kind of how I see you. And I know you're just, like, an incredible athlete. Like, I will not take that from you. Like, I never seen someone jump so high, sprint so fast, do all of it. But I see you more as, like, David, the sculpture.
So you're saying I'm good looking?
Incredibly, yes. Yes, pretty boy. Just called you that, pretty boy. So, I don't know how to digest the fact that you've cut more weight than me. It's like, can you let me be better than you at something?
Bigger than you.
I don't really care.
But that's relevant for cutting weight.
I really don't think I could have done that. I'm actually very impressed. I feel like what you explained about your weight cutting, that fun anecdote, is like 100% what I was doing in high school every week. And I did achieve my goal. And I didn't get to see that for a long time. It was delayed gratification, and I do look at the Sonora Wrestling page, and when I see the girls team highlighted just as much as the boys team, like, I'm so happy because wrestling, it wasn't just like this feminist thing for me. It was that I fell in love with that sport because it was a sport of character. Wrestling builds character. It's not really a sport about winning. At least when you're as bad as I am, it can't be about that. And there's even the most beautiful thing about it, I think, and a lot of sports have these like underdog stories and like heroes' journey stories, but I think the beautiful thing about wrestling is this acknowledgement from other people about how you can win a match potentially like on paper, but you didn't really win that match. And that's a culture and that's an expectation and that's like a seeing of the people. It's like it's a real beautiful thing to me.
Yeah, speaking about what you just said, I had a couple thoughts, but what you just said about, you can win on paper, but you don't feel like you won. I just saw an interview from the most recent NCAA tournament where a guy had moved into, I don't know if it was like the semifinals or the finals, but they're interviewing him. And his interview is basically like, I wish the other guy was here instead of me. I wrestled like an absolute coward for the last minute and just played it safe and didn't do anything I wanted to do and just skated by and won on points. I don't deserve to be here.
Yeah.
That was his interview.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
But the other thing I think, at least for me as an outsider who hasn't wrestled, the thing I found so unique about it is that I know there's actually a very big team cohesion aspect to wrestling, like amongst your team, but it is ultimately like an individual sport when you're on the mat,
Yeah.
one on one. I feel like there's very few things that combine that with just the sheer gruesome element that wrestling brings out of you, whether the training or the drilling or whatever else. I don't see a lot of sports where it's both just you out there and it's so physically hard to be there. Like, I ran track, it's an individual sport. And yeah, I had a practice where I threw up running 400s. But I'm not going to pretend that that's as hard as wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, I did track. I was like coerced into doing track. I think coerce is a really strong word and probably not at all appropriate and probably offensive, but I was asked was asked to do track, and track practice was our warm up,
Yeah.
like every day. And that's actually kind of funny too. It's like I'm telling all of these crazy stories. I don't know how interesting they are, but I remember we would run sprints. We would run. I mean, we'd run 400s. We would run hundreds, meters, yards. Honestly, to me, they're pretty similar, right? Kill.
Meters.
I'm not that good at math. Units. I don't know if that's science. Anyway, we would be running and I would be doing the sprints and I would be coming in like fourth, fifth place. I was like, why am I so slow? This is in wrestling. And then I got to track and I was like way ahead. We had to do something like some people, I had to wait at the start line I mean, to be fair, that was sprints with the long distance team. So
To be fair.
I probably was just like even with the sprinters. But yeah, I mean, it's like so interesting to me because I just did all of that thinking that I was just honestly so bad. And sometimes I wonder, like, imagine winning, and that's you. That's you. You win. You're a winner. You win things, you're good at them. It's a beautiful thing in and of itself, too. And I think, like, what I love most about wrestling and why it was so important to me to, like, help do my part to open the doors. And let me be very clear, like, it wasn't just me. It was my male teammates. It was my wrestling partner, Johnny, who endured a lot of bullying and teasing, that he was my partner, and he respected me so much, and he supported me. And that's like what you're saying, is that there's nothing like it. There's nothing like being in a wrestling room, working through your own stuff next to someone supporting you through it. It's like a sense of camaraderie that's unmatched. And I think that, like, when we think back to our best days, a lot of it has to do with, like, our relationships, who we were with other people. So it's this combination of, like, we were setting goals and we were pushing ourselves forward, but it was also like either we were being acknowledged by someone else or we were seeing someone else. And like, it's I feel like it's not that hard to look at the world today and see that, like, our problems are very much self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Today, right, our goals. I mean, yeah, so taking a step back, it's like, when I really think about it, is that my goal that I had defined, it was my goal. That came from, like, me. And I can't really just say me, it came from my upbringing as well. Like, I owe everything to my parents, my extended family. I was gifted with, like, blessed, given, whatever, provided, whatever word you might want to use. I had incredible people surrounding me. And I was raised to, like, give, to think socially, to think on a macro scale at large. And so if I think about this goal, I crafted that goal through myself. It wasn't in competition with someone else at all.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't actually competing with anyone. I looked at myself, I looked at the world, and I said, this is what I want to strive to do. And in the wrestling room, you're competing, but you're, like, working on yourself, you're building your character. A wrestling match is technical, you're learning these nuances, but it's also like an endurance of spirit.
I like that phrase.
I think, like, in so many ways, and also, this is not true, and I'm saying all of this, and, like, I was not a great wrestler. Like, I think of Victoria Anthony. She was a year younger than me, my hero, my absolute hero, and she's such an intelligent wrestler. I mean, she has a finesse, a speed, but also an intelligence that I just don't have. And so there are kind of, like, two sports you can play too, with the two games that I think make up wrestling. The beauty of Victoria Anthony is she plays both. Like, it's so inspiring to watch her. But, you know, that's kind of what I think I'm also getting at is like, we, like, if you ask people what their goals are today, it's like, I want to buy a house, right?
Yeah.
My goals are I want to buy a house. I'm trying to start this business, have passive income. I want to lose weight. I want like a six pack. I want to be ready for my beach vacation. And I'm not discrediting any of those things, and I've had those goals myself. But are those goals, and then when you hit that goal, is it actually like making you fulfilled?
So then maybe we need to be asking better questions. Instead of asking, what is your goal? Should we be asking, what is your dream? When did you feel the epitome of yourself? Because, I mean, I've even said in some of how like I approach my work that we need to ask better questions when we're assessing somebody's feeling a certain way, whatever. I feel like that even applies here because language is powerful. When we ask what's your goal, and everybody's language that they're used to hearing, seeing, being exposed to is, I want to buy a house. You gave good examples. They're answering the question, what is your goal? So should the question be better? Should the language be different? Instead of asking what's your goal, helping them look at this differently and instead asking what's your dream?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I actually think you got to pull it back even further, and I don't think we have time to dive into it today in this like little chat we're having. But you know, I think it actually has to do with like character and values. And I'd have to like read up a little bit on kind of that the psyche elements of those things. Mostly because I don't think I've really read them. Maybe I skimmed it. I mean, it was taught to me. It was taught to me by my parents, my extended family. I mean, they're taught to us in stories too. I read a lot as a kid.
Yeah.
I think that's where you get a lot of that also. Your dad, probably a lawyer, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he wrote too.
Yeah.
So a lot of those lessons, we hear them in stories, athlete stories. But we're, in terms of the media we consume, like, that's really not what people are consuming anymore. They're consuming, like, influencer consumerism products, not consuming stories of soul journeys, really. Yeah, maybe that was a lame phrase. Maybe that's giving like alt pseudo spirituality, but
I think it was a good phrase.
yeah, I mean, like, Plato talked about a soul. Okay, I don't think that guy was doing like yoga chakras and stuff. I don't really know. There's not a lot written about him.
He
I
wasn't
know.
hosting retreats in
At
Sedona.
least in sixth grade, when I had to do a report on him before Wikipedia, there was about 4 lines.
He hit the Britannica Encyclopedia.
I want to say he wasn't in there. I mean, if you're talking like, I found this like on the interwebs, of which I don't even know. I doubt there was a search engine. I found that he was the mentee of Socrates and the mentor of Aristotle, and that he wrote a book called The Republic. That was my whole report on this guy. Yeah, it was bad.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
I was like, so there's actually nothing written about this guy in terms of where he came from, what he was like. You know, I'm like now wondering how we got more information about it. Fascinating dissemination of information, but we do not need to go down that rabbit hole. Pearson textbook conspiracy theories. Yeah. I'm coming for you. But, how are we going to wrap this up?
Is this the end?
I think so. We're talking about, I think that has to do with values.
So ultimately, when we're talking about how can we ask better questions, how can we use language to help people reframe and rethink and reinvent, I think what you said is a good way to disseminate it further, or take a step back, however you want to think of it. It's asking people, what are your values at your core?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, what I'm saying is, like, you were like, is the question, what are your dreams? And I'm saying, right. The real question is, what are your values? Is it really as simple as we've lost sight of our values? And if you really think about it, I went through the public education system. I don't recall learning about values in school.
No, that's why I think, at least for me, sport was so important.
Yeah,
Sport is where I learned
100%.
so many of my life lessons and values and things like that. It was through sport and the hardship and everything else that comes with those things.
Yeah, I think that you learn them definitely in, like, sports narratives, sports stories. And then there was definitely, in some point, I think, a separation. And that's where you're so interesting, honestly, scholar athlete vibes, because you were scholar athlete, actually.
It's true.
Actually, we get it, okay? We get it. You're good at everything.
You brought it up, not me.
That's because I take, like, it's almost like I'm a barnacle.
Go
I'm
on.
just, like, on for the ride. I'm like, yeah, I'm with this guy. Like, I want to take a little bit of credit for that
barnacle.
achievement. Yeah. Isn't, like, a barnacle on a whale?
Yeah, these are accurate. It's
Yeah.
just funny.
I'm trying to just, like, latch on. I'm trying to get a
I
ride.
feel like you need to still classify yourself as more than a barnacle.
That's honestly, like, no, that's pretty, I think, very accurate. I'm just going to be on for the ride. But yeah, you are a scholar athlete. And I think that there's just been a lot of division, I think, between, like, athletes and scholars. And also, I mean, the whole, like, grade system and what we define as teaching and testing and
Or smart.
smart. Right. And I think, like, I mean, there's a lot of layers. There's a lot of ways to look at it. You can peep, like, let me throw a little promo out here for Conspiratalk launching soon. I can't say the name of the host because they're anonymous, but Conspiratalk, where we talk about potentially why this could have happened, how we're investigators. We're asking the bigger questions, following the cookie crumbs down. I don't know, okay? Fingerprints? I don't know. But anyway, reeling it back in here. I mean, yeah, values are also great and all, and I think that's going to, like, set our tone and guide us. But what's a little different about, then and now is, like, we do have bills to pay.
Yep.
We do need to make a living. But, I think it's like, how do we do that? I think in terms of our values, right, that's going to guide us in our decision making. One of your, like, values, I would say, is, like, you want to make an impact. You want to do the greatest good. You're like of service in a lot of ways.
Uh-huh.
And but also it's a you journey. And so what are some values you'll lean on to get you through this next chapter? And then what the expression of what your business looks like. what you trade for, what you're giving in return for, that's all going to be adjusted and changed. And I think it's really saying, forget what just happened, right? Let's just take a step back here. This is a huge opportunity to say, you've been a personal trainer for a long time now.
Uh-huh.
So what evolution do you want to make? And don't limit yourself to what could or could not be possible. And we start there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the question was, what is the epitome? When did you feel the epitome of you?
Let us know.
When did you feel the epitome of you? You heard our answer. We'd love to hear yours. Write it in the comments. Shoot us an email. Write it on a piece of paper. Put it in an orgone generator. Light it on fire. Safely, if that's possible. I don't know, carcinogens, etc. Maybe don't do that. Maybe just tear it up, put it in the shredder.
But
Maybe fold it into an origami crane. Put it in the trash. Waste management. Little plug there. Highly recommend. Investing in their stock. I don't think I can say that. Trash ain't going anywhere.
Not financial advice.
This is not financial advice, but trash ain't going anywhere. For now. Hopefully it will in the future.
Look around.
Anyway. That's all we got. Bri and Wes out.
Cheers.
Thanks for love, your support. Bonsai. I don't know. How do we end it?
Cheers.
No. It's literally not a thing we can do. Peace.
Oh.
Peace. And there is something about, like, putting every morsel of yourself into something. And, but also, at the same time, I was, like, frustrated with what you said, because at the same time, like, yeah, that I feel like maybe did a lot of damage to my body.